The air was filled with dust. Loud crashing sounds echoed through the quiet neighborhood as two bulldozers tore into the walls of my family home like it was some forgotten shack. My childhood room? Gone in seconds. The place where my mother planted her rose bushes? Flattened. The living room where we had Thanksgiving dinners every year? Reduced to rubble. I stood in the middle of the street, hands trembling, staring in disbelief. Neighbors peeked through their windows. Some watched from their lawns. But no one said a word. No one stopped them. I screamed, "What are you doing? This is my house." But the workers didn't even glance my way. Then I saw him. Mr. Carter, the new HOA president, standing across the street in his expensive suit, sipping coffee like he was watching a boring TV show. He didn't recognize me. That was his first mistake. "Do you even know who I am?" I shouted. He looked at me with a smirk and said, "Doesn't matter. This house violated too many HOA codes. We're cleaning up the neighborhood." The ground beneath my feet felt like it vanished. The house my parents built with their bare hands, destroyed. My voice cracked, my eyes burned, but I refused to cry in front of him. I pulled out my phone. If they thought I was just some nobody, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. 3 months earlier, I had just moved back to Greenville, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Georgia. After spending 8 years overseas working in international law, I decided to come home, especially after my dad passed away. My mother had moved in with my sister in Ohio, so the family home had been sitting vacant, but perfectly maintained. The moment I returned, I noticed things had changed. The HOA had gotten stricter, and a new board had taken over, led by none other than Terrence Carter. He was one of those power-hungry types who loved enforcing rules just to feel important. He introduced new beautification policies, demanded permission for everything, from mailbox designs to garden layouts, and fined homeowners for the smallest infractions. I didn't care much at first. I kept my distance, focused on fixing up the house. Every corner of that place held memories. I wasn't just repainting a porch, I was bringing my family back to life, one room at a time. Then came the first warning letter. "Your fence is 2 inches too high." 2 inches. My dad and I built that fence when I was 14. It stood tall and proud, just like him. I ignored it. Thought it was just a petty rule they'd forget. But they didn't. The letters kept coming. The fines increased. $200 for leaving trash cans visible for 15 minutes too long. $500 for having unsightly bushes. I tried reaching out to the HOA board to reason with them, but every attempt was blocked. No callbacks. No meetings approved. Just more threats. Then, one morning, I walked out to find a bright red sticker slapped on my front door. I thought it was a scare tactic. No one destroys someone's home over a couple of bushes and a fence. I was wrong. So very wrong. The next day, I received an anonymous letter in my mailbox. It had no name, just a typed message. "They're coming. Get out while you still can." I stood on my porch, gripping the mysterious letter, the words dancing in my mind. "They're coming. Get out while you still can." At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe some old neighbor trying to scare me into moving. But deep down, something told me this wasn't just a prank. My instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had saved me countless times in legal battles overseas. I scanned the neighborhood. The streets looked peaceful, kids riding bikes, an old man watering his lawn, someone jogging with their golden retriever. But I could feel it, something was off. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me jump. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my dad. What would he do if he were here? He used to say, "You don't fight fire with fear. You fight it with proof." So the next morning, I did exactly that. I started collecting proof. I installed security cameras around the property, front yard, backyard, porch, driveway. I kept copies of every HOA letter, took photos of every violation they claimed. I even recorded my calls, though most went unanswered. I went to the county clerk's office and pulled up property records. That's when I found the first bombshell. The HOA had filed a motion of demolition on my property, without notifying me officially. It wasn't legal. But it was filed, approved by some internal HOA panel, not even the county. I was furious. But I was also calm. Because now I had something. The surveillance footage. A week later, the footage from my driveway camera showed something that made my jaw tighten. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a man in a gray hoodie walked up to my porch. He wasn't trying to break in. He walked directly to the power meter, turned it off, and disappeared into the night. The next morning, my porch lights didn't come on. My cameras had stopped recording. And then the second letter came. We warned you. You've been given more chances than most. You've ignored them. Now, we act. It was signed anonymously again, but I recognized the phrasing. The same tone used in the HOA's violation notices. Cold. Robotic. Threatening. They weren't trying to find me anymore. They were trying to erase me. The fake meeting. I finally got a reply to one of my HOA emails. It said, "You've been granted a final appeal. Show up Thursday at 6 p.m. at the HOA clubhouse." I showed up early. Dressed in my best suit. Briefcase in hand. I wasn't just there as a homeowner, I was coming as a practicing attorney with international credentials. I had documents, video evidence, legal codes highlighted in red. But when I got there, the doors were locked. No one came. No lights inside. No cars in the parking lot. At exactly 6:02 p.m., I received a notification from my security app. Motion detected. Front door. Backyard. Garage. I opened the app. What I saw nearly made me drop my phone. 2 trucks. 4 men in reflective vests. 1 bulldozer rolling up my driveway. They weren't waiting for any decision. They were already tearing my home down. I ran out of the clubhouse, jumped into my car, and floored it. As I turned onto my street, clouds of dust rose into the sky. I could hear the engine of the bulldozer groaning. I screamed through the windshield, honking and flashing my lights. But the workers didn't stop. They couldn't hear me over the destruction. And Mr. Carter. He was already there. Standing on my lawn. Smiling. My tires screeched as I pulled up to the house, or what was left of it. Half of the roof was gone. The entire front wall had been ripped down, exposing the living room like a dollhouse cracked open. Shattered glass, crumbled bricks, and the splintered remains of our old family piano littered the ground. The smell of sawdust and broken memories hung heavy in the air. I jumped out of the car and sprinted toward the workers. "Stop! You have no right to do this!" I yelled. They looked at me like I was a stranger trespassing on a construction site. But it was Carter who stepped forward. Calm. Unbothered. Holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "I told you," he said, "we gave you enough warnings. We followed the process." I stared at him, heart pounding. "You didn't follow anything. This is illegal. I didn't even get a proper hearing." He smirked. "Sometimes, people need to be reminded that rules matter. Maybe next time, you'll comply before it's too late." I pulled my ID from my jacket and shoved it in his face. "You clearly didn't do your homework." He glanced at the ID and paused. His smirk wavered, but only slightly. He didn't recognize the name yet. So I said it slowly. "Jordan Avery. Federal Civil Litigation Attorney." former senior legal consultant for the U.S. Embassy in Berlin. The blood drained from his face. "And you just destroyed my registered family property," I added, my voice calm but dangerous. "Without a court order. Without a verified demolition permit. Without my consent. Every second of this is being recorded, and every second is going to cost you." For the first time since this started, Carter had nothing to say. The backroom plan. But I wasn't done. While Carter tried to recover from the shock, I pulled out my phone and called Detective Marie Dawson, an old friend from law school who now worked in the county's fraud division. "I need you to check something for me," I told her. "I think the HOA president just filed a fraudulent demolition claim on a family home, and carried it out without due process." "I'm on it," she said without hesitation. While the dust still floated through the air, I walked through the ruins of my home. Every step I took over broken beams and crumbled bricks felt heavier than the last. I found the doorway to my old bedroom. The door was gone. So was the wall. But I could still see the faint outline of the posters I'd taped to the wall as a teen. I took a deep breath. They didn't just demolish my house, they tried to demolish my history. But they messed with the wrong person. The residents speak up. That evening, as the news spread through the neighborhood, word of the wrongful demolition, the fake hearing, and Carter's shady actions, neighbors began to come out. Some came to offer comfort. But many came with their own horror stories. "I got fined $700 because my roses were the wrong shade of pink," said an older woman named Mrs. Jenkins. "They tried to force me to repaint my house twice in 1 year," said a young couple. "Both times, they said the color didn't match the community standard. There's no official color guide. They've been threatening to evict my grandmother for having a wind chime," another man said. It all started to click. The HOA wasn't about maintaining the neighborhood, it was about control, intimidation, and greed. I invited everyone to meet at the community center that weekend. "We're going to fight this," I told them. "Not just for me. For every single person they've bullied." The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Detective Dawson. Her voice was tight, serious. "Jordan, you were right. I just got off the phone with the county building office. The demolition permit was forged. Carter had help, from someone inside the HOA board. But that's not the worst part." She paused. "There's a shell company. Tied to Carter's wife. They've been buying up foreclosed homes for pennies. Your house was next on their list." I replayed the voicemail again, barely breathing. "A shell company tied to Carter's wife. They've been buying up foreclosed homes for pennies. Your house was next on their list." So that was it. This wasn't just about an ugly fence or 2 tall bushes. It was a setup, a long con, where homes were systematically targeted with outrageous violations, homeowners bullied into selling or forced into foreclosure, and the properties quietly bought through dummy corporations. And I had been marked next. But I wasn't just any homeowner. I was the one person they never should have picked. The hidden web. With Dawson's help, I dug deeper. The shell company, registered in Delaware under the name Luna Restoration Group, was owned by a trust. On the surface, it looked legit. But a deeper dive showed that the trust signatory was Yvonne Carter, Terrence Carter's wife. A hairstylist on paper, yet listed as the CEO of a $1 million real estate firm. I filed a request to pull every HOA board member's financial records and began connecting the dots. Within 3 hours, we discovered 2 other board members had recently bought new cars, both paid in cash. One member had suddenly wiped out their mortgage, weeks after a property beautification project drove 3 homeowners into foreclosure. HOA funds had been quietly funneled into maintenance vendors, all of which shared the same billing address in another state. It was fraud. It was theft. It was corruption, and now, it was all in my hands. The community fights back. Saturday came. The community center overflowed with neighbors. Old, young, single moms, war veterans, retired teachers, people who had all lived in fear of the HOA's punishments. Now they were ready to fight. I stood at the front of the room, holding a thick binder filled with evidence. "This isn't just about me," I began. "This is about all of us. Our homes, our families, our rights." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "They forged documents to demolish my home," I said. "And I have reason to believe they've been targeting homes across this neighborhood, your homes, for profit." Gasps. Shouts. A few people stood up in disbelief. "They've been using fake citations to push foreclosures," I continued. "Then buying the homes through shell companies connected to the HOA board. I've got the receipts. I've got the legal backing. Now we just need the will to act." A retired Navy veteran, Mr. Alvarez, stood up and raised a fist. "Let's take M down." On Monday morning, I filed a class action lawsuit against Carter, the HOA board, and Luna Restoration Group. Within 24 hours, a restraining order was issued, preventing any further demolition, fines, or citations from the HOA pending investigation. By Tuesday, county investigators and a local news crew were on my lawn, what was left of it, capturing every frame of the shattered home and the rising fury of the residents. Carter tried to play it off. "It's all a misunderstanding," he said to reporters. "We were enforcing policy, nothing more." But he was sweating. Because his empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even brought out my biggest move yet. That night, as I reviewed the footage one last time, something strange appeared on the security tape, something I hadn't noticed before. A shadow. A figure. At 2:13 a.m., the same night the power was cut to my cameras, someone entered my house. Not the utility man. Not a worker. But someone in a suit, carrying a tablet, walking straight to the study. They weren't just trying to demolish my house. They were looking for something inside. The figure on the tape moved like they knew the layout of the house. No hesitation. Straight down the hallway, past the guest room, and into my father's old study. I paused the footage. Zoomed in. It was blurry, but I caught a detail, a gold cufflink, the kind Carter always wore, glinting under the hallway light. He wasn't just targeting my home. He had broken into it himself. But why? What was he looking for? Then it hit me. My father's safe. Hidden behind an old bookshelf in the study, it had been sealed for over a decade. I had never opened it, never needed to. But Dad had always said, "What's in there will protect this house long after I'm gone." I returned to the ruins the next morning and dug through the debris. The study was nearly leveled, but the back wall still stood. I found the safe. Burned. Battered. But still locked. It took a professional locksmith 3 hours to pry it open. Inside, wrapped in layers of protective cloth and tucked into a waterproof box, were original land grant documents, signed and sealed by the state, dating back nearly 70 years. They stated, in plain legal terms, that our property was exempt from future HOA enforcement unless voluntarily agreed to. My father had never agreed. And neither had I. That made the entire demolition, not just illegal, but a violation of a protected property covenant. And now, I had the final weapon in my arsenal. The courtroom was packed. Carter sat beside his lawyer, pale and hollow-eyed. His wife wasn't there. Word had gotten out that she fled the state after news broke about the shell company. The other board members had all resigned. I stood before the judge and laid out everything. The forged permits. The extortion tactics. The secret shell company. The financial fraud. The illegal demolition. And finally, the land grant documents that made everything Carter did a direct violation of state and federal law. The judge didn't need time to deliberate. Within minutes, Carter was ordered to be taken into custody on multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit fraud, property invasion, unlawful demolition, and breaking and entering. The HOA board was disbanded immediately. A full audit of their finances was launched. My neighbors cheered in the courtroom like we just won a championship. And we had. It took time. But the city council, outraged by the scandal, awarded me a full restitution package. News outlets ran the story for weeks. Lawyer exposes HOA demolition scam, takes down entire board. I used the settlement money not to leave, but to rebuild the house exactly as it was. Every room. Every corner. Every childhood memory. But this time, with something new. A tall wooden sign out front, carved by hand. It read, "This house stands for justice." And beneath it, HOA Nightmare Survivor, Jordan Avery, ESQ. 6 months later, I was sitting on my porch with Mrs. Jenkins, sipping sweet tea as the neighborhood played tag on the lawn. The fear was gone. So was Carter. A knock came at the door. It was a young woman, nervous, holding a folder. "I just moved in down the street. I heard what you did. I think they tried something similar in my mom's old neighborhood. Would you be willing to help?" I smiled, stood up, and said, "They messed with the wrong house. I won't let them mess with yours." If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.